the customer details will be stored, and then they have something related to provisioning, which means they need to send you the physical SIM card to the customer, and the other thing is the billing. So you may have a prepaid or a postpaid, depends upon billing plan you want to choose. So under this particular epic of 5G, they're going to create multiple user stories, which is going to be falling under for these different modules. Like they need to create a user story so that they can implement, do the necessary changes in the existing ordinary portal to accommodate the 5G. So that is going to be a user story. So like this, they need to add for a product catalog as well. So they need to add a product catalog that 5G with prepaid, 5G with postpaid, and 5G together with some other additional OTT billings. So something like this they need to create in product catalog, and that is going to be a user story. So this is a general example of what is an epic and what is a user story looks like. I hope it is clear. If you have any questions, you can post it in the chat and we can discuss at the end. And Logesh, your take on epic and user.
Yeah, so guys, hope you're clear with the context that Naresh explained. So like in a generic, so consider we are going with the product, we can consider a product as an epic. Like in the product will be segregated into different categories or subcategories of the products, right? So we call the bulk of products or bulk of categories that has been clubbed together as a product. So here we consider the product as an epic. So in order to test an epic, or in order to test user stories, in order to test what exactly the outcome of an epic, it can be segregated into different categories or products or at different chunks in agile terminology. So chunks, we call that as a user stories. Like combination and a collection of user stories forms an epic, or a collection of products or a categories form a product. So in a generic phase, so like Naresh said, please put that pointers which you have, whatever the pointers that you considered you're not clear with what we are explaining, you can put that in chat and we can pick it up further. So let's move to the example category. So Naresh, you can pick this and we can go ahead.
So like I explained, to achieve a particular product or to achieve a particular functionality, they'll initially create an initiative. And these terms like initiative, epics, user stories, tasks, and it may vary depends upon which application you're going to use. If you use Trello, the terminology will be different. If you use Jira, it is going to be different. But the general idea is this. So you want to achieve a particular product or a feature, and then to achieve that, you're going to create one or multiple epics. Under this epics, you're going to have multiple user stories. Under these user stories, you may have multiple subtasks as well. It depends upon the team who they're working on. They have all the freedom, because in some team they'll create a development task and testing task under particular user story. In some teams they'll create a development user story and they create the testing user story as well. So it is according to their flexibility and how their the whole team and the project and the whole company works. So it is up to them to define all these things. But the general idea is this. So epic is like if they want to achieve something, they'll create the epics first. It's like they'll try to understand, they'll talk to the stakeholders. The business people will talk to the stakeholders, and stakeholders will talk to the product owners, and the product owners who are the ones who will create this epic. So they'll define this epic as such. As a company, we want to implement this. And when it comes down to the user story, they'll define something like, I think they'll define it according to the personas here. So as a customer, I want to buy this or place this 5G order. Or as a user, as a product owner, I want to get this done. So they'll write user stories in this like this statement. And as you all know, every user story has its own components, like description, acceptance criteria. In case if it has a feature group or product group, they'll mention that as well. And under this acceptance criteria, they're going to define what they want to achieve. So this is the general idea of epic and user story. And now we are not going to see all this definition of ready, definition of done, because that is according to the Scrum framework. And in some teams they define it and some teams they don't define it. So what we are going to see today is, now you are getting a user story. It may be groomed, it may not be groomed. How we are going to approach it? So how we are going to make things our way. So what are all things we are going to do to get things done here? So to do an effective testing, we want data. So maybe in the next slide, we can see how we are going to approach it. Yeah. And maybe Logesh, you can give example for epic and user story.
Yeah. So guys, so in generic, like I said, mostly my examples will be in generic. So hope you have been a user of Swiggy. So first it launched for the food category. So where we can order a food and it can be delivered. So next it has been moved to Genie. So here the initiative will be a Genie. So in the initiative phase, they will discuss about how the structures, how the expectations look like, what was the challenges that we have faced during the food delivery sections. So during initiatives, they will plan it and derive all the plans. The plans will be segregated into different epics. So like Genie, credit cards, or dine out. So these will be a different epics in this. So when we pick an example like Genie as an epic, so in Genie, the different user stories will be whether a user can pick it or a user can receive it. So if that is the case, is there any possibility to drop it, or the customer or the person who is going to be delivered comes to the pickup point and delivers it? So this is how the stories, initiatives, and epics has been segregated, and it has been moved back to the Agile. So like in the product perspective, let's move to the essential aspects of the user stories that we start focusing on. Yeah, short.
So yeah, here when we say essential aspects, so this is specifically from the tester's perspective. So now we are not going to discuss about what all the user story should contain, whether it should have acceptance criteria and all those things. So now you are getting a user story for testing, and I discussed with many testers, and I came to know that some of the junior testers are participating in the sprint grooming, and some are not, because they simply say my test lead will do the grooming, and they'll simply give us the stories. So in this context, they don't even understand what is an user story, what is an epic, and they don't even get the bigger picture. So here, what we are saying is you need to get these aspects to do the effective testing, which means first you need to understand what is the context of the particular user story. So why are we having this user story, and what we are going to implement in this user story, and who are all the people who is going to get impacted by this change of this particular user story. Then we can come to the acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is something like they want to achieve with this user story. It could be a UI functionality, or it could be a backend functionality. Sometimes it could be even a minor changes like cosmetic changes in the UI. It doesn't matter. But as a tester, we need to understand from this acceptance criteria what I understand. And next one is the user personas. So who are all going to use this part of the application, whether it is a backend change when nobody is going to use it directly, but whenever you do some action in some other scenario or flow, this is going to be used. So you need to have this understanding of the particular user story, about the particular changes, and who is the person who's going to use, whether it as an admin going to use it. So as the example given by Logesh, the same Swiggy Genie flow, who is going to use it? A customer is going to use it. The service delivery partner, who is the person who is going to transfer this courier, they're going to use it. So when they log in, they're going to see the application in a different perspective. And when you use it as a user, you're going to see the application in a different perspective. So as a testers, it is our responsibility to ask these questions, get it clarified before starting the execution of the story. So next is the functional specification. So if, in the UI, you need to ask questions about what are all the fields we have, what are all the changes they're going to do, whether it is going to impact the backend or not. Sometimes they have the restrictions in the UI itself that you can enter only 50 characters. Sometimes they allow it in the UI, but they restrict in the API. So whenever you enter more than 50 characters in a field, you will get an API response saying that it is not allowed. If it is not in both places, then it is an issue, because if the database or the server which is handling the particular request, it may crash or it may fail abruptly. What we need to try to do it here, we need to figure out whether they have the restriction here or not on the level of UI or API. And then, yeah, Logesh, your take on these four first.
Yeah. So when coming to the user story context, mostly what people let me take an example of me. So when I get a user story, so my first questions will be what exactly it's going to solve, rather than what exactly the functionality is about. So we need to understand what exactly the problem and how the user story is going to solve it. So that will be reflected in the acceptance criteria. It can be either in a one-liner, like with this, the login functionality is going to be a touch functionality, or there is not there won't be any password, then we can move to the screen tap on it. So the impact of the acceptance criteria should be the solution to the user story. So that is how the user story should be. It shouldn't be like it should work as per the description. It should work as per the fix. So we should focus on the context. The impact should be on the acceptance criteria. So once we are clear with the user stories, the context of the user stories and the acceptance criteria, we need to focus on the people, like Naresh Ed. So who is going to use the application? So what exactly is the problem is? How did they resolve it? So what was the existing problem, and is there any existing solution for that? So in that phase, we need to focus on the personas, who exactly used it, how they are going to use it, and what is the impact that we are going to create, either it is a story or a bug. So once we are clear with the user personas and the acceptance of the user stories, then we can go ahead with the function. So there might be a hidden functionalities or hidden dev works or dev perspective works, which will not be explored or introducible by the product manager. So for that, we need to understand. So we need to implement the context of the functional specification to analyze and understand and work accordingly instead of going with the assumption. So this is a major and core part before we start focusing on test data or a testing perspective from my side. Yes, Naresh. Over to you.
The next one is test data. So as Logesh mentioned, it's the same. So you need to understand who is going to use it and how they're going to use it. Sometimes the product owner is going to think from the functional perspective, but the test data may touch the points where they haven't thought about. So as a developer, we need to check with the developer regarding these aspects. What kind of test data we need to use? I'm going to use this set of test data. Is this enough? And with this, we can say extensively test the application. We cannot completely test each and every application because, as I said, sometimes they have restrictions on the UI level. Sometimes they have restrictions on the API level. If you get separate user stories for UI and API, you can test it separately. Even in some case, which is not useful at all, because if they have the restriction at the UI level itself, testing these things in the API level is not mandatory, because it is not going to be achievable in any real world scenario, because everything is restricted in the UI itself. So if you can't enter more than 25 characters, testing for 150 characters in the API doesn't make sense at all. But yeah, even in this case, you need to make sure that it is handled properly and it is failing gracefully if it happens. Because in future, because of some minor change, if they forget to put this restriction in place in UI, it should not crash the application, but it should fail gracefully. So for that, we need to have these restrictions on the API level as well, and that should fail gracefully. To understand this, we need to ask and have an understanding about the test data as well. Which means when we talk about test data, you know as a tester what are all the inputs you are going to give and what are all the expected outcomes as that. So I think we also have the expected outcomes in this list. But yeah. The next one is the dependency with the other user stories or the modules of the application. If you are testing an enterprise application or an application which is very huge, even if it is a small application, it is going to talk to the other modules or other parts of the application. So in this case, when you test an user story, most of the times we mock the responses, or we mock the requests which is coming from the other application. So with this, we are not testing the whole integration. So we are testing just for the particular functionality which we are developing in our team. So in this case, the dependency is plays an important role, because if you don't agree with the other teams that this is the exact request we are going to use, or this is the exact response which we need to use, if it is not agreeable, and in case if you are using particular field which is not sent by the other team, eventually during the end-to-end flow, it will fail. If you are not doing the end-to-end testing, it will definitely fail in the production, because that scenario was never tested by us, because our assumption is wrong and the other team's assumption is different. So in this case, everything will be a failure. To make sure that, we need to ask the questions about dependencies whenever it is required. The next one is the in scope and out of scope. So if it is a new product, a new feature, then yeah, the in scope, out of scope, it will be very clear the start itself. Even then, we need to ask this question to make it's to everyone to be on the same page, because a product owner may have a different assumption, a developer may have a different assumption, and as testers, we may have a different assumption. To make everyone to be on the same page, we need to ask questions about what is in scope and what is out of scope for this particular user story. If they're going to touch a particular functional area, we need to have this clarity. Again, the next step is the pair analysis and pair testing. I think pair analysis is something you will discuss with separately or together with your product owner and developer, even with the peer testers, to get clarity about more about the functional ideas and how technically it is implemented. And with the testers, it is going to be different perspective. What are all the test ideas I can include? What are all the test data which I can include to test it differently? So to get all these aspects, we need to do this pair analysis and pair testing, that is during the execution. So during execution, if you include a person who is not part of these discussions, they may ask some small questions can trigger big ideas for us, especially the edge cases. And yeah, Logesh, your take on these points.
Thanks, Naresh. That's not the test data. So mostly test data, so we can derive in different categories. For us, we derive as a positive test data, negative test data, and poorly designed test data. So when we take a positive testing, so we'll be focusing mostly on whether it is getting the inputs, whether it's accepting the input. So the outcome is same. And for the negative, what if the test data accepts what is expected, like a boundary values or cross-functional equivalence partitioning, can be anything. Like how it handles unusual situations or exceptional situation, or how it handles unexpected inputs. Those are the negative cases. Like poorly designed test data. Most of us will use it, including me. Like it will test only some possible test scenarios, which will hamper the quality of the software. So this is how the test data segregation has to be done, and we need to pick up the data which is necessary for it. And dependency, hope Naresh actually explained it. Let's take an example. So consider we are checking for a small chunks of a Gmail, like inboxes and sent items. So we are testing it separately. So there is a user story to test or create email, and whenever create email has been done or email has been sent successfully, it should move to sent item. So it has been segregated in a different way. So in order to test the, so it's mostly it will be like mocking data. So I would have mocked whenever a successful create items has been moved to sent items, but the actual flow or data flow has not been tested unless and until the dependency has been known and understood by the tester. So it will be fulfilled only when both implementations or the modules has been clubbed together, and we are checking with the actual data or actual data flows. So like whenever user are able to create emails, and if he clicks on sent items and if it is successful, it should move to a sent list. So this is a dependency of a module or an applications, and in scope and out scope. So most of the user stories will have a minor impact or a major impact. So we need to understand what exactly is in scope. So it's not going to make an impact if there is a minor UI fix and we are going to test the API. So the fix is in the UI. So we need to understand it from our perspective, like pair analysis and pair testing. So these are the terms where most of the peoples, even most of the organization have been followed. That is from my experience. So the pair analysis helps us to club with the product owner or product architecture or the test architecture, or with different categories of a user. So how they are thinking from the aspects, how they are working, how exactly the user stories came into picture. And pair testing. So have you ever done, you can put your responses in the chat, have you ever done any pair testing with the product owners or with the customer support people who are done fixing most of the issues, or with the developer actually? So once he is done with the unit testing, have you ever created any test strategies, test scenarios, test charters with product owners or devs? So try it. If you're not done, if you're doing, that's good. We would like to hear more from you. And moving to the next one, expected outcomes. So mostly we understand, we assume, and we work. So we will not understand what exactly, or we will not implement what exactly the expected outcome is. So this is where a major flaws comes into picture. So we need to understand whenever a context understanding has been done. So what should be the quality? What should be the outcome? So what if it is not as per the outcome? Is this okay to go? Rather than taking the call during a sprint end or a production release. And mostly we need to focus on the test environments that we are doing. So is that really a test environment, or we are mocking up, like, or we are literally replicating or any duplicacy from it? So we need to understand the end-to-end part of it, like from context understanding to deployments, how it has been done. So these are the essential aspects of the user stories that we follow, and it would be good also if we can implement the same, and you can put that in the chat as well if you have any questions. So Naresh, are we good to go to the next one?
Yeah, I think before that, see, these are all the essential aspects for a tester from the tester's perspective, as I said. So you see, in Agile Scrum, they have there's something like definition of ready and definition of done. So definition of ready, they define it, but nobody follows it. So according to definition of ready, each and every user story should have acceptance criteria. Each and every user story should be understandable by team. Each and every user story should be groomed by the whole team, and they need to give the user story points. So these are all going to be the pointers of the definition of ready, but nobody is going to follow it. They'll define it, they'll keep it somewhere idle. Nobody is going to refer to it or use it in a while. Some teams are really following it. I appreciate them, but yeah, some teams, they say they are following hybrid and they don't follow it. So we are testers, and we don't have so much take on these things, because it is something they need to implement across the organization or across the whole project. So here with this presentation, what we are trying to say is, we are testers, we cannot control these things, but these are all things which is under our control. So we need to think in these perspective, and you can create your own checklist as well from these aspects, because if you create a checklist for each and every user story from these aspects, it will give you clarity of a particular user story, even for an epic that you will understand what all things it's required from yourself as a tester. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. So yeah, I think pair analysis, we already explained it a bit much. So pair analysis, nothing but once after the story is groomed, or even before the story is groomed, it's our part that we need to understand the what particular functionality they are implementing, or what changes they're going to do with a particular user story. And then you need to do this pair analysis with either a product owner to understand from the business perspective, or you can do a pair analysis with your developer once it is pitched into your sprint and your developer started working on it. And before starting the execution, you can ask a developer for a walkthrough. You can have together you can have a session with the developer and ask him about, these are all the test data I'm going to use, and these are all the test case ideas I have. And is there anything else I need to add to test this? So those analysis will give you, a more clear understanding of how it is implemented. And developer will explain from their perspective that this is the technical implementation and this is how they implemented it. And these are all the test data which makes sense. In some cases, the test data which we prepared doesn't make sense at all. So they'll clearly tell us that this doesn't make sense. If this comes, we are going to handle it in this way. So then we know what is going to happen when we use this kind of test data, and what is the error message we can expect, and how it is handled. So these are all the ideas you can get from the developer. And from the product owner, as I said, you can get more about the business ideas, how it is going to impact the business, even if it is a small change, how it is going to impact the users. You can take a small example, like they're going to change the logo of a particular company. This is a very minor change for us to test. It doesn't make sense for us to test at all, because even a product owner can test it, because they're going to change the logo in all the places. But if you try to understand why they want to change the particular logo, what is the idea behind that logo, what this new logo gives ideas to the new people who are looking at. So those questions will give you a deeper understanding of why they're doing this change. If an old company which is coming up with a new logo idea, they want to tell the world that they want to try all the new technologies in the world. So that may be an idea, which means you need to understand this is the particular change is going to impact. So if it is even missed in some places like customer support or in user self-help portal, you can ask business owner, is there going to be change in the business user self-service portal as well? Because there also they need to implement this. Only then the user will know that this is the change. And yeah, and according to the peer testers, pair analysis is like your brain picking other peer tester, because they have different perspective, they have different experience. If you talk to people, they may give different ideas based upon their experience. Sometimes even a silly questions can come up with new complex scenarios. Even there is no such thing as silly questions, because it is a question which is going to provoke an idea in your mind. So that's my take on para-analysis. Logesh?
Yeah, so most of the point has been already covered by para-analysis. So let me give a generic one. So mostly I'm using a generic term, yes. So a product owner will have their access to their deep market knowledge and the strategy, which helps us to present the vision to the stakeholders. So we need to understand what exactly is happening from the product perspective, rather than understanding the technicals or analyzing the skills or segregating the skills from our side. So it stops in the product. So we are not understanding what is the market standards. We're talking about the market that is in the situation. Talking about how exactly they are pitching the market. What is the feature they are going to implement in? What actually they are doing when they communicate with their developers, when they communicate with their customers, how the design has been maintained. So until unless we analyze, so with the product, we'll not understand what exactly has been segregated, how the priority has been generated, or where the backlog has been created, how exactly the backlog impacts the sprints or the businesses from the business perspective. So mostly we are focusing on the technical perspective. We haven't and ever considered from the product or the business perspective. So once we are good with the product expectations and the implementations and the communication or the changes, we were good to go with the dev sections, like how the design has been implemented and how they are going to reinvent it. Like it can be a new feature, it can be a legacy one, it can be updated one. So how they are going to implement from the dev perspective. So once we are good with the product and dev, we can segregate from the product dev ideas rather than focusing only from the tester's perspective. So in prod dev, it helps from the user perspective. From the product, user has been covered, and from the dev, the tech perspective has been covered. So this helps us in engaging the business to the next level. Like we are creating a strategy not only from the testing perspective, from the prod to prod. It also helps us to connect or communicate with the pair testers or peer testers from the different teams, or it can be anything within the organization. So with the help of them, if you connect with them, it helps us to provoke what the information or the what is the knowledge they are having, how it can be segregated and implemented from the analyst part. So this is a vague information that I might have provided, but this helps if you can implement the same during your scrums or before your scrums. Mostly this will happen before execution. So that is a core part of it. So this is the right time to jump into the test design. So this is how we used to follow. Because now it helps me to have a good confidence about what exactly the product, what is the implementations, what is the fix if it is a bug, and what I'm going to focus on.